Okay, all right, there we go.
Very well done.
All right. So Suzanne, do you want to take
All
it
right.
away?
All right, but Adriana, we know we'd already saddled you with a few questions that you have and we're curious about. Maybe you could start, would you like me to read them out and go that way?
Sure. You can read them and I'll answer them. I think these questions are quite brilliant. As somebody who asks questions, I love these.
All right, thank you. Our first one was, the book moves between people, locations, and time periods. I mean, we have Scotland, we have Italy, we even have a little bit of India. How did you choose this approach for the story?
Well, when I write a novel, I assume it's going to be the last book I'll ever write. I don't know why I do that. I have a sense always that if this is it, I want to make sure I tell it in the best possible way. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is that I cut 350 pages from this novel because one of the arcs of it was the Winston Churchill story. But when we were done, this thing was a monster. It was so big, and the order and flow was pretty much as you read the novel without the swath of Mr. Churchill, of the Prime Minister. Now, when we pulled that out, it really became, thank you so much, Jorge, an intergenerational family story, and which was my intention. So I tried in telling it to keep it as linear as I could, but the elephants that bookended it were important to me because I wanted to write about women in the natural world as we are as human beings, which is we don't get our due, we pull the heaviest loads, we get no credit, but we are self-contained and powerful. So that's kind of how I figured out how to do it. And then generationally, it played out because the grandmother has the granddaughter come over at the beginning of the book, and it opens up the world of how to tell the story. I wanted it to be like you were sitting with your grandmother and she told you the story of the family that you had never heard before in its detail. Does that answer the question?
I have to interject. You've sent a little temptation out there. Why was the story about the elephant so important to you? I can't leave that.
Because I would say this, because it is the origin of the story of women. Such as we are in the natural world, we are put upon in the real world as human beings. And an elephant is symbolic and revered, misunderstood.
In this case.
To me, it really describes what it means to move through the world as a woman.
Wow, I'm glad we asked that.
It's not just because that's where they find rubies.
Right.
It's really symbolic about being female, being a woman.
Yeah.
And as you know, we're always under attack. We're blamed for everything.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That was a lot of great.
I know, it's a lot.
Now, well, speaking of a lot, and you really hit a key note here, you have our book club to discuss your book, and the front row are the book club members. We'll all put our hands up. And then online, we have a few more, and we have a few more who have joined us for the audience. But the book club, the group that met, about 10 or 11 of us, all agreed that we're hoping there's a sequel particularly about Scotland. We really want to know, I'm kind of jumping around here, but you kind of hung out those 350 pages, and I think you have some potential readers here for the 350 pages. And we were hoping it was more detail about the Scotland episode, including why did you put in such a bitter mother-in-law? Yes.
Well,
I mean-
everybody that's got daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws, relax. It's not about you. But I'm going to just say this. I could speak only for my own family. Okay. I have a wonderful mother-in-law. She's a great lady. Okay. I don't have any problem with her. But I have noticed throughout history and time in my own family how exacting and difficult the mother-in-laws could be. Now, some are, as we say in Italian, pieces of bread. They're fine. And others will, the daughter-in-law will never be good enough for the son. Ever. I don't care if she splits atoms and makes great spaghetti sauce. It doesn't matter. She will never be good enough for the son. And what I liked about this lady, and she's based on somebody real.
Oh, wow.
She is, was that her own husband was such a disappointment, she transferred that to her sons.
Yeah.
And one took off. I mean, he's a missionary. And the other one, as you know, is our character, and who loves his mother and loved his father. But that, I guess there was a little bit of this in it, ladies, which was sometimes men choose professions that war with home life, that leave the responsibilities of the home completely to the woman. And I loved that as a dynamic in this novel, that there was a woman who resented it. She resented her role. And the man that she married was not the most loving husband. And I think I was making this sort of statement ribbon, not that you're making a statement, but to open up the story, which is when people feel unheard, unappreciated, and unacknowledged and unloved, they will often turn bitter. And that's who she is. She's not bitter because of what her son is or who he brings home. It's not that she's prejudiced against Italians because she needs a sieve, a jar, a container for her bitterness, not a sieve, something to contain her bitterness. And why not prejudice? Because prejudice against immigrants is easy, because they're usually poor, they're usually yearning for something better, they're hard workers, and they're invisible. So there's many reasons not to like them, right? Especially when you feel you didn't get what you deserved. And I would like to make this as a broader statement over this book. The reason I wrote this book now is because I saw what was going on the border in the United States. And I went, when I found this immigration story, or it found me, I really didn't find it, it came to me. I didn't know about Italian immigrants in Scotland. I knew nothing. But I thought, what an opportunity to write this in this fashion. And then it turned out that this was a story around the world in every country, including our own.
Yeah. Oh, very much.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's, if you really look at this novel, in terms of immigration, I want you to think about the Jewish family, the Ethiopian Italian. Nobody thinks there's Black Italians. There are. Even Italians don't realize it.
really?
So here we go. It's so interesting to me because when you love people and you make a family, you make a worldwide family. People say, why are there wars? We can't get along at the kitchen table. How are we going to get along in the highest conceptual notion of a country and a philosophy and a democracy when we're fighting on the ground? That's all in there.
Yeah, yes, it is. You said the story came to you, the immigration story, the Italian Scotland. Is there a story in that, in how it came to you?
Yes, I was directing a movie in Scotland. and starring Kathy Lee Gifford, and she wrote it, and Craig Ferguson. And you can see it. It's called Then Came You. It's the opposite of my novel. It's very light, airy, and fun. About a widow who goes to Scotland with her husband's ashes and what happens to her. And I was directing it. And so I had a weekend in Glasgow before the actors arrived, and I wanted to get some ideas. And I thought the best way to get my mind off things is to go to the places that I wanted to visit in Glasgow when I was on book tour many times, and I never went because you kind of get in the hotel, you do the event, and you leave. So the story came two ways. The first way the story came was that I wandered into a church called St. Andrew's Cathedral in Glasgow. And it intrigued me because it was Protestant, it was Catholic, and it flipped to Protestant for 350 years. And then one day it flipped back to Catholic. So when I got there, it's very interesting. When I got there, it was set amongst all these modern buildings, but there was this piece of antiquity. And I'm standing in the back of the church, and there's a wedding going on. And there's me and a bagpiper. And so in the Italian tradition, it's good luck to see a bride on her wedding day. And so I thought I'll stay for the mass. And I'm known to crash weddings, and I'm known to crash viewings. I don't stay for the meal. I just like to be part of it. And if you remember back in your childhood, you're going to remember weddings where you went and there were kind of women like in work clothes in the back, just sort of watching it like it's a movie, right? You know what I'm talking about. So I'm in the back, and I realize this is 2018, the spring. My mother died in August of 2017, coming up on the 6th anniversary of her passing. And this was a few months fresh. And I realized that the bride chose every song my mother had played at her funeral. And I'm crying. So there's a wedding in the movie, and I'm taking pictures because I'm thinking I can use this in the movie. So I'm standing there taking pictures in street clothes, and everybody's fancily dressed. And behind me, a man says, "Who are you?" And I say, I turn around, and it's the priest. And I said, "Oh, Father, I'm just a tourist." He said, "What's your name?" I told him, and he said, "I knew you were Italian. Go see the garden." And then poof, like magic, he was gone. So I continue to take pictures, and then I go to the garden, and I go into this garden. It's a memorial garden. I don't know what it is. I can't find a plinth to tell me till I walk around. There's these shards of glass. A Roman architect built this garden. It's modern, set against this very old cathedral that's hundreds of years old. And then I find the plinth, and it says, "This garden is the memorial garden for the Italian Scots who perished on the Arandora Star, July 3rd, 1940. So I take a picture of it because I never heard of this. What is this? What's an Arandora Star? I didn't know anything. And then I do something that's a tradition in my family. When we go to a memorial, we read the names aloud. So I began to read. I'm alone in a fallow garden, and I'm reading these names, these beautiful, lyrical Italian names. And of course, I cry. And then I get out of the garden, and I call my researcher, and I said, "I don't know what this is, but there's something here." So she goes off, and I go on with the day. And I go to a library, and I start to look this stuff up. I have to know, what is this? Because it's something that happens to me when I'm going to write a book. I feel like I feel a tingle, like something special here. When I got to the set and my crew had been hired, there was Maria Luisa and a Pietro, but it would be like a name like Pietro McClintock. So I went over to him, and I said, "Hey, are you Italian?" And he said, my grandfather was Italian. I said, "Have you ever heard of the Arandora Star?" I never heard of it. Well, the reason that you never hear these stories is because of this. Immigrants are terrified of the knock at the door, get in line, you're out, go home. It's a terror. Now, keep in mind, the Italian Scots, just like Italian Americans, Jewish Americans, Spanish Americans, Cuban America, you could keep it, Puerto Rican Americans, served in wars. Served in wars, many to earn their citizenship, like my Italian grandfather. Served in wars, had their children here, educated their children in the United States, paid their taxes, lived honorable lives, followed the law. And then one day, everything that you are is questioned because of your lineage. This story's been buried in history because people love Winston Churchill. So did I. I have a sign over here. This was on my father's desk. Now it's on mine. Never, never, never give up. Winston Churchill. My father would do his speeches, but he committed one of the most heinous, made a heinous decision that thousands of people died of Italian descent on their way to internment camps. Some never returned. Some made it to Australia. But when this Arendora Star happened, ladies, it's all true. I just basically wrote the history in a fictional manner through the character of Antica on the ship. Here's the sad part. It wasn't the only one. But here's the difference between the chuckleheads that often rule countries and the chuckleheads that govern countries and make stupid mistakes, and the great ones. The great ones admit they did something wrong. The great ones say, I made a terrible mistake. Churchill said, this was a disaster. He was mortified that these guys were murdered. Churchill loved Italians. He went to Italy to paint. He was a fine art painter. His novel was set in Italy. He wrote about, he loved Italy. He went to Germany. He loved Germany, but he had a simpatico nature with the Italians. And the first thing he'd do would be to go to Italy. He didn't want this to happen. He didn't realize why it happened. And when he realized it, he said, I've made a terrible mistake. These guys aren't bad guys. This is not my fifth column. But when you're on an island, the way you win a war is from the water. Most countries, even landlocked countries, they come in through the ocean. Something I didn't know. Well, let me tell you, the Nazis had surrounded this island and they were running operations off the coast of Ireland, between England and Ireland. It was a horrible mistake, which has repercussions today. So I thought, when I heard this story, I said, that will be the historical context to which I tell the story. And then as the research rolled out, and it takes me a couple years, and I'm writing, intel came in all the time as I was writing more about the way this country, meaning England, had to conduct itself during the World War to preserve itself. And I wish I could tell you this was the only mass murder of immigrant Italians out of England, but there were many more ships and many more stories, and they aren't taught. I'm published in the United Kingdom. They didn't teach it in school. So I just say to you, when you look at the border and you look at immigration in our country, have a gimlet eye. I don't think you're getting the whole story. But of course, time will tell, and it'll come along and things will change as they are wont to do. But I found this story so mind-boggling. And then you can extend it to every country on the globe.
So
And then
really,
another sort of thing happened, which is that this beautiful, I had a beautiful assistant, Alexa Casavecchia. She's now a producer at the Today Show, who worked for me. And her grandmother was an Italian Scot. Her Italian Scot grandmother was placed in a convent school, the convent school in the book. All of that's real and true. The priest, Father Fracassi, is a real character. The gem cutter is a real character. The Ethiopian is a real character. So I take real and I mix it.
how wonderful. And all these pieces.
Like I've read every World War II novel too, as you have. And I've seen the movies and I've read the nonfiction books, including Eric Larson, who I adore. Okay. But what I can bring to it is I take the truth and then I try to paint it with a brush that is specific and artful. And for me, when the Italian Jews in Venice, the Venetian Jews are rounded up, and not 6 months earlier, they were on the other train with the white tablecloths and the rose in the window on their way to vacation. That to me, in a couple sentences, described how Hitler was able to operate and what the experience was. You know, we often blame the victims in history, but what this book dramatizes is, well, why didn't they run? Why didn't they stage a coup? Why didn't they react against? Please think about it. My neighbor was the cop. My sister married a Scotsman. Who's going to come and round you up? You think you're safe. You think that you are one of them, even though you emigrated from your country of origin. But alas, no, you're not safe. You are whatever those in power perceive you to be or not to be. How sad is that?
Yeah.
And that priest embodied that for me. Look, did he rent out the church basement to fascists to have their political meeting? Yes, he did. But he had a hole in the roof and Rome wasn't sending the money. So he was doing fundraisers. He wasn't a fascist. He just was renting his hall. But it cost him his life. And those are the stories I love in history. The untold ones. The untold.
I wonder if that's what makes part of it so powerful, that you built so much of it on facts that came to you. There's a priest at the end, or on the Andorra part as well, who kind of, I've forgotten the name of the priest.
Father Fracassi, it's his real name. That's the only real name in the book.
The one who is with the men at the end.
Yes, that's him, Father Fracassi. And he married Captain John McVickers and Domenica. That's the Catholic priest they went to marry them. Same priest. And I just based it on his real life. I did a lot of research on him. And of course, he had no heirs, this particular priest. And so his name would be lost in history. And I thought, I'm going to put it in here.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
But, you know, I just remembered where we started this from, and we are so grateful for all the background you're giving us. Will there be a sequel? And will it be those
Well,
three?
I hadn't thought about it, but I think it's a great idea. Let me think about it.
Will you think about
You know
that?
what would be wonderful too? A sequel. And also I would love to see it dramatized. I think it should be a series. It's quite beautiful and it's layers.
All right, well, good luck with that. We'll be watching. could you talk to us a bit? Now, you do have references in the book to what the title means. And we
Yes.
talked about what we thought the title meant and where we saw it in the book. There's so much more that we would like to know about. Why did you choose the title? What does it mean? And where do you see it in the book? Some examples of us seeing that in the book.
Okay, so so specifically you want to know what that ribbon was that, okay. The first peasant pope was Angelo Roncalli, who became Pope John the 23rd.
Yeah. I
I have a family connection to him in this way. And if you read the history, when he's dying in 1963, he inquires for the Spada family at the top of that mountain, which is my grandmother's family. His family were farmers at the bottom, but the reason that the first peasant pope was important to me was that he was the first pope that was not royalty. Prior to that, they'd all been Italian royalty. And if you're Italian, you know what I'm talking about. It's like a little flim-flammy to me. So it's a little flim-flammy. But Angelo Roncalli is one of the reasons that a major reason that I'm Catholic is my raising. And I fight my battles inside the church. And I won't bore you with them. But he was a great writer and philosopher and journalist. And he was, Angelo Roncalli he went to the School of Common Sense. And his spiritual life was informed by this little church that he attended in Sotto il Monte, Italy, at the bottom of the mountain. My great-grandfather, Marco Spada, was kind of a mad inventor who ran a cart with a donkey and a horse up and down the mountain because they had no cars up there. There was just like a dirt road went up the mountain. And I imagine that he stayed with them when he got to the bottom, where he rested the horses there, had a meal with them. That's what I imagine. So there's two, and my grandmother's family had a bunch of kids and the Roncallis had a bunch of kids. And the baby in my grandmother's family became a journalist and a priest who ran the L'Echo di Bergamo, which is the newspaper, publicly owned newspaper. So that sets the stage. I rely on his wisdom, and I went to visit this little town, and in the church and this was completely by coincidence, were the words of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. And many saints wrote their thoughts about how you get eternal life, how you earn your salvation and get eternal life. And so I took Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who, by the way, because of Marseille, France, who he is the patron saint of, that was just a God wink. I didn't plan that. When I came to my French research, where she's banished to this convent, he appeared. So the title comes from Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, and he laid out in the past, the present, and the future, the ways you get to heaven. So, and he wrote this, and this was in Italian in that church, and I wrote it down and then later found it, that in his journal, Pope John the 23rd had written this: "Let whoever longs to attain eternal life in heaven heed these warnings. When considering the past, contemplate these three things: the evil done, the good left undone, and the time wasted." Well, I found that during COVID, and it became the scaffolding of my novel: the past, the present, and the future. And the good left undone, to me, was the essence of the lives lived in this novel. Whether we're talking about Domenica, Anina, Nella, the construct of the French nuns, the construct of the Italian Scots, of Winston Churchill, the good left undone really becomes what the thing that might save us had we done it. So to me, the good left undone represents all aspects of the women of this novel and those things which we couldn't achieve that would have made all the difference in our survival. That's where I got the title. Did I have to fight for the title? Yes.
Did you?
Because,
They eventually loved it, but at first they were like,
you know.
Really? That doesn't surprise you?
No.
well, you know, I feel like they rely on me to tell them what I think is going to work. I mean, I loved the cover.
Yeah.
And I wanted to put a book out in the world that said this. And the time wasted, those 2 years we lost, we're not going to get those back. And I'm not advocating that we shouldn't have been in lockdown. I think we saved a lot of lives that way, and everybody can argue amongst themselves about that. And I also think that I could draw a line from St. Bernard of Clairvaux to Winston Churchill. I felt that tension wire between a saint who was elevating the misery of mankind and a leader who was commonsensical but terrified. And I could draw a line directly to COVID and the way it was handled in this country. I'm not interested in people who tell me what they're going to do for me. I ascribe or subscribe to my mother's philosophy, which is don't tell me about it, show me. Do it. And then talk about it. So I did have leadership on my mind a lot. I did. And of course, when you're telling a fictional story, there's those things that happen and those things that are imposed upon us. For example, when I'm writing about women, and I think every woman there can relate to this, as we go on, there is such a lie perpetrated upon us that we hit 50 and it's like, that's it for you. Well, that comes from men. I preach about the great lie because I feel that once we get these kids launched, we can think again. We can read. I'm in the most explosively intellectual, spiritual, emotional time of my life. And now, aware of the ticking clock, which we all are, you know, I could pick up the phone and get bad news any minute. I need to read that which will elevate me. So the Good Left Undone to me was really a manifesto through hopefully artful storytelling. But I want to think about salvation, and I want to live in a way that I'm sharing with you and that I am bringing love into your life and not the negative things. And watching my own country be manipulated by crazies. And by that, I mean, don't get upset. It's not politics I'm talking about. It's the ideologies of greed, facade and fakery, moments spent away from what the things that truly matter, the disregard of other, I mean, are these the themes of our life or what? And if you could tell it, you know, I don't like to be lumped in any category. Please don't call me a World War II novelist. I am not. I'm just, because I felt this was a modern contemporary story that went into the past. It was never sold that way. And I think that hurt it in a certain way. But you found it, so it's not sad to me. You know, like I said to my friend Bonnie Garmis, she wrote a story set in 1960. That's historical fiction, but they did not sell it like that. They sold it as literary fiction. So she escaped any of the, you know, the branding. I'm proud of when it was set because I couldn't tell the Winston Churchill story now, but not to marginalize it. And not to marginalize, listen, I get my wisdom wherever I can. It doesn't matter. I like that. I like the peasant pope. That appealed to me.
Very interesting. So much. Thank you so much.
That was a long answer about the Good Left.
But we were very thirsty about that. So that was a good, we were glad you had a long answer to that. We have one other question.
Yeah.
I want to make sure all right. You talk a little bit in the acknowledgements.
Mhm.
Yeah, the first line of the acknowledgements. This novel is about how we live and what we leave behind. So to a point, that's what you just talked with us about. The center of everything, or at least the stories I attempt to tell, is the family. And that beginning of the acknowledgements comes right after the close of your epilogue, where you talk about the boy who finds the ruby. And all the little boys are thrilled because they'll all eat because they share the proceeds from the ruby. Did I understand that correctly?
You understood it perfectly.
And you said that this is where you take that, you know, I got through the whole book, understanding all the layers and the commitments, you know, to how important it was for the family to have stories so that they stayed understanding each other. Then you kind of exploded in this last line when you say the boys are a family connected by something much deeper than one name. There is one table and all are welcome to the feast. And I think that's where, I don't know if you have more you could tell us, but again, I was so struck by you saying that this story about the elephant and the ruby mines was so important to you. How did you ever find a way to have a story like that, that completely, to me, kind of exploded that this was a story about family, as in you're my aunt, you're my brother. She isn't, but I have an aunt and a mother. They come before she, because she's not my family. And you exploded it in that Ruby story. Was that were we to come away with this as the concept of family as much greater than genetics?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm crying. I think you caught it. Well, look, I was raised in a place where people were poor. I never thought I was poor growing up. I didn't think about that. My father was kind of like a complicated. I'm not trying to sell the idea of family as perfection, but as fate, and you grow into it. As mothers, and if you're not a mother, you are a mother anyway. We're all responsible for children. I have always a sense that that there are not fences. When people want to put up walls, I say, put up a bridge. Put up a bridge and welcome people. Don't put up a wall. A wall says, I got something I ain't giving to you. You can't have what I have because I'm more important than you are. these concepts are my mission. And I'm going to tell you, people I love, people I know, people I grew up with disagree with me. I say to the women of the world, we've been left out of history. We're not written in the history books. So what else is missing? The story that you know about your own people is the story we must hear and you must share. Because really, ladies, when it comes down to it, I mean, maybe you got a few daughters that are going to fight over your jewelry. What are you leaving them? What are you leaving? What are you going to leave them? Some of you instantly said, my faith in God, I'm going to leave that. You've done that. No, what are you really going to leave them that is unique to you? Even when it's something that you make, there's a story behind it. The lady sent me this today. Look at all the trouble she went to. It took 9 months to get to me. I did this thing online. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, she did a nest with 4 eggs in it. What does it mean that she did this? What are you leaving behind? We're here and we're gone. What haven't you said? I wish if I were president or if I were queen or if I were something, I would say to folks, get a notebook and write down your family stories. You don't have to be a writer like me. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. It's a 7-day-a-week job I've been doing since I was 10. I said to Stephen Wright today on my Facebook Live show, I said, I wonder what people are thinking when they're walking down the street because I'm always working on something. When I'm with my daughter and we're riding in a car somewhere, I'm present for her, but my mind is always thinking. I say this to you, when you write, you don't have to be that. You can just say, I remember when my grandmother rolled baklava in the kitchen, it smelled like cinnamon and butter.
Okay.
1977. That's the day she told me about her mother. Whatever you remember, because I will guarantee you, when you're gone, you want them to find that. You want them to find your essence, what you cared about in particular. The only reason a person like me as an artist even exists is because of the women in my family. The men's stories are pretty tasty, but it's the women who told it to me. I honest to God believe that there's still anti-Semitism because those wonderful young men that came home from World War II didn't tell us everything. I honestly believe that there's still racism because we only know about Harriet Tubman. So when you hear, or I hear as the daughter of a librarian, book banning, that's a flag. When you hear cultural appropriation, that's a flag. When you hear a governor doesn't want to teach aspects of history, that's a flag. But we're fat and happy as long as we get ours. This is wrong. That's why the Shelter Island Public Library is important. It's a place of ideas and intellectualism and exchange and spiritualism also, and faith and family and love and all of those things. In that library, it's all housed there. We as women, look. The other day, somebody said, look at our rights are leaving us. Where are the women attorneys? Retired and working. Where are they? They're the experts. Put it out there. Women are very powerful when they want to be. But somehow our stories got lost. Who allowed that? We did. We allowed it. If that's unacceptable to you, and it is to me, we have to write these stories down. Look, I'm an Italian American and I'm dismissed. The New York Times doesn't review me. Oh, they'll write pretty articles and, whatever, mention. But they don't review Italian American authors. Does anybody say why?
No.
So I went back. I looked up the review for The Godfather. It was written by Dick Schaap, a sports writer. One of the highest selling novels in the United States written by an Italian American of all time. You have to take me seriously as a woman, don't you? Now you might say to me, oh, Adriana, do you really care? I can't care about that. That's up to the audience to demand it. I can't demand that. But the fact that I'm with you honors me. I love you for it because it's important to you. And the reason that I come to your library and Willie comes along and Jody arranges it and I come back and I bring Ellen is because that's what I can do for you to encourage readers and to support readers. The sad part for me is I try, I don't know that it's enough, but I'm on a mission to make it enough, which is why I do the show and I'm ultimately doing a podcast, because I have these conversations with great authors and I think you need them. And and they will grow you. They will grow you.
So much for sharing. I think your passion and your, I think we all know much more about how many senses of mission you have, and you stimulated our thinking about this is far more than a book about a nice family. But you mentioned something, Terry. Did we know that Adriana was the daughter of a librarian?
Yes, I knew that.
Well,
But I've been kind of stalking her around for a lot of years. So.
Terry has been stalking me for many years. In a good way. In a wonderful and good way.
another way that Terry's been stalking you. She just got back from Scotland. And we want to know if Terry, take it from here.
So Adriana, I just went to the Orkney Islands. Do you know about the Italian chapel there?
Yes, ma'am, I do know about it. And the British Film Commission is after me to film a movie there.
It was spectacular, and I spent 5 days or 3 days on the Orkney Islands, and I thought about you because I thought about the book, and here we are, and there's these two Quonset huts that they turned into this beautiful chapel, and it's all painted, and it's what do they say? It would trump, I don't know,
It's made of, they had no materials, but it's a chapel made from paper.
Yeah.
That they have preserved.
It's beautiful, and I don't know, the story that they told was at the front, right before the altar, there's a little tiny black heart-shaped rock. And they said, there's two different stories, one which is more romantic, which is that an Italian fell in love with an Orkney lass and had to go back home, and the other one was he had to go back home to his wife and his children, so we'll take one of those.
Love it. I love it. I love it.
I think you should take them up.
You know, I would love to think of a story that I could do there.
Yeah.
But you hit a good point, Terry, is that these prisoners of war, when Churchill said collar the lot of them, they sent some to the Isle of Man, to the Isle of Skye, to the Orkney Isles, to Canada, to the Falklands, to Australia. The reason you have pizza in Australia is because of World War II.
Yeah.
They sent them away. Yeah, yeah. And Canada, a great many in Canada, but it ripped these families apart, and many hundreds of thousands, hundreds of that didn't come home ever.
Yeah, true. So anyways, I think you should go to the Orkney
But
Islands.
don't let me get up. Yeah, I want to go. I really want to go there. I went all the way to the top, but I didn't, but I know all about it from the books that they gave me.
Well, it was, I thought about the book a lot when I was there, so it was nice to have like a literary reference to think of when I was in Orkney.
But you
so.
know, the British version came out today in the
Oh.
UK. Yeah, yeah. I said to them, because I'm supposed to go over and tour and everything, and I said, they didn't know this. They don't know the story. It's a lot like in this country where we don't know everything.
Mhm.
Where people look at maybe slavery in a certain way, or they look at anti-Semitism in a certain way. They don't get the whole picture. And these little stories, some of them grand in scope, change things for people, because then they pursue knowledge about it, which is the role of the library. My mother used to say that to me all the time. Any question you have, you'll find it in that library. The answer is there. Think about that. That's why I encourage you to write your stories. And you don't have to do it. You don't have to make a big deal out of it. With these little phones are magic. Hi, I just want to tell you kids about my mother.
Yeah.
And catalog them. Don't even, if paper and pen is not your thing, but please write them down. They're essential. They're so essential. And I tried to tie that in as this story went on, is that this woman feels she's not doing a great job. And this is the other gateway that I really wanted to make clear, is that the second half of life, however you want to define it, 50 on, 60 on, 70 on, however you want to define the second half, you have a job, which is to make sense of history for your family and to make sure that they know everything that they need to know. And that your legacy is your family story. By the way, the good, the bad, the ugly, it's all important. All of it's important. All of it's important.
Questions for Adriana. We promised Andrea, who has been such a pleasure to work with. Is that Andrea's pink blouse? We saw a little.
Yeah, come in, Andrea, say hello. She is magnificent, and she has a master's in creative writing from the University of Missouri. She's brilliant.
It's been a pleasure to
I'm
work
training
with.
her to take my job at some point.
We want to honor our promise to her to get you off by 6 p.m. But I don't know if there are any.
Is there any other questions? Could I please say this before we go? I want to thank the Shelter Island Public Library, because I know you're doing an expander, right?
Yeah, good, yeah.
Shelter Island is magical, but I have to tell you, my events for you are really, truly memorable, because you have such a mission there. And I have the most wonderful memories. And I hope that you'll invite us back, because I know Willie would love to come back, and we'll do it again.
Perfect.
Thank you. You're all beautiful, and I thank you for having me.
You're welcome here anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Lots of love. Terry, keep stalking. I'm stalking you.
Behind you at any time. Take care.
And thank you, Suzanne. That was beautifully done. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care
Thank
now.
you.